that has joined us today for our Fireside chat. Um, we see that AI has moved a lot over the past couple of years, right from just being a chat interface to systems that can reason, plan, and take action. And we also see a lot of coding agents coming in, and the way software is being built, the way product teams work, way software is built out is changed a lot. And so to make sense of all of these things and where we stand and where we are heading next, I'm excited to welcome our guest. Uh, about Gary. Gary is a technology executive, AI leader, and a business builder for more than 35 years of experience, spanning software engineering, cybersecurity, enterprise technology, go-to-market leadership, and AI. And as the chief AI officer at Lead with AI, as the
We
chief,
maybe mute everybody.
yeah,
Thanks, Amit.
as Chief AI Officer at Lead with AI, Gary brings a unique combination of engineering expertise, executive leadership, entrepreneurial experience, and nearly 3 decades of consulting practice. His focus is helping leaders and organizations understand, adapt, and apply AI in ways that create measurable business value and lasting competitive advantage. So, welcome, Gary. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Sri. And Sri is the actual CTO practitioner who is building in a real setting. So it's very good to have Sri here as well, asking the questions.
Thank you so much, Gary, for joining us today. I think let's kick off with the topic itself. Maybe we'll kind of ease into it. I think let's start with the word agentic, right? I mean, agentic has just become like a big buzzword, at least over the past 12 to 18 months, and it's getting louder and louder, even more than the term AI itself, I would say. But there is there are varied definitions of what agentic is. So if you can probably help us demystify what is agentic AI, like what I think that would be a good start to begin with, I guess.
Yeah, I actually asked around as well before coming in here, because even now when I type that term into my phone or my computer, like it tells me it's a spelling mistake. It's just not even a real word, right? So it's kind of made up. But really, without playing like semantic games, I think what it's trying to say is there is a type of application in AI that has agency. Right, so it's basically saying, okay, there's AI that doesn't have agency, and I think we might get into that a little bit. It's like, and then there's and that being we haven't given it the permission or capability to do anything beyond talking. So if you think like an AI assistant like ChatGPT, before we forget about all the connectors and things, it's like that thing was an assistant. It was like a board of directors. It would give you information, but it wasn't doing anything. It didn't have any agency to act in the real world. So when we talk about agentic AI, there's many different flavors of it. And if you talk to a developer, you can get into an argument pretty quickly about what it is and what an agent is. If you talk to somebody in marketing, then it kind of depends on the company because they see it through their own lens. So if you look at Anthropic, the way they talk about agentic is centered around LLMs, same as OpenAI. They talk it centered around LLMs because that's what their business is.
Right.
So I think I really prefer the way Andrew Ong talks about agentic. And he says, don't care if it's an agent, don't care if it's an agentic. It's like, does it have less agency? Is it less agentic? Or does it have more agency? And think of it on a spectrum and forget about the semantics and just like think along those lines. Are you giving it permission to act in the real world? Are you delegating authority to it in order for it to be able to do that? And then if you do that, then there's the problems that you have to deal with when you do that. That's how I like to think about it. It's more of a spectrum than a thing that is tangible that you can even hold on to.
So you're saying that it's so agency is more like how much autonomy it can take up.
And that comes from, I always like to look at the words in the taxonomy of the words, right? Like an agent is something that has agency, and something that has agency is an agent. And then in the real world, like this is just humans or whatever. And then if you think about agentic, it's describing the verb of being, having agency.
Having agency.
It's trying to be that verb of having agency.
Right. And when we speak to a lot of our customers or even the prospects, there are a lot of and people are trying to box agentic into some form of the other. I mean, for example, most of the prospects on the sales or marketing side, they're aware of chatbots, right? And
Yes.
then there are your co-pilots
Yeah.
that people are aware of. So there's a lot of always this blurred line between is it a chatbot? Is it a co-pilot? Is it an assistant?
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe some clarity there would be good as well to understand how are these different from the rest here.
Yeah. And again, this is like semantic wording. I
Yeah,
still like to think of like grounding it in reality. Like, what does it actually do for you in the real world? So when we first started, a chatbot was basically an LLM, a large language model, and we can talk technical. I think this is a technical audience. So the LLM itself, people are not sure what it does, but you're a chatbot, you ask it a question, it gives you an answer.
right.
Whether that answer is good or bad is like irrelevant. That's kind of the assistant level thing. Or if it was a co-pilot in a coding IDE, it was doing, you would type a word and it would finish the code for you, right? Looking at what's before, what probably is coming after, and the context it has, it was auto-complete the code. So those are co-pilots. They work along with you, but they're not doing anything special, right? That's the LLM, so the first stage. And then the next layer along, we were doing things like agentic workflows or agent workflows, and maybe even just AI workflows, where you would stick multiple LLM calls into a structured workflow, whether that was in coding using an SDK and calling the LLM, and then you defining the workflow very detailed, step by step, or you're using low-code platforms like N8N or Make. You're really defining the workflow, but at some stages you ask an LLM to do something that is not easy to do otherwise, right? Deterministically. Say, summarize this document, grade this document against this rubric, look for this particular phrase inside this big corpus.
Right.
So those things are then in a workflow. So that thing becomes like an AI workflow. And then people started to say agentic. This term kind of floated in there, but
right.
And then at one point, it's like, okay, well, how can we put an agent into a workflow? And then we put an agent in the workflow. It's the agent itself. If you visualize it, it's the LLM in the center of the brain. And then we'd give it a harness, like a small harness around it, and we connected tools. We give it some memory. And then that kind of sits inside our workflow. And then an input comes in one side, a trigger with data. It will make decisions based on that. And this is the difference between an agent and an LLM, right? The agent has to look at the data. It makes a decision and makes a decision, some kind of decision, and then is asked to do something and make a call to some tools. And then if it's in an agent loop, it should then assess its outcome against a rubric or a success criteria, and then iterate until it's successful. And if it gets stuck, there should be guardrails and things like this with the human in a loop. So that then becomes like an agent workflow. So that's the next stage. And then agentic's kind of many different ways of people talking about this. But if you have multiple agents working together and they all have discrete tasks, think of like a customer service agentic system where there's a central router, and then it'll be like support ticket agent, returns agent, like chat agent. So we have this like agentic system where they're all working together and they have access to different tools and different instructions. And then some people call that an agentic system because it's more than one thing working together.
Got it. So,
but it's not like strictly defined, because if you go to another person in a different company, then they may define agentic in relation to how they think about their product.
Right. But it just seems like the overarching fundamental is that there is a certain level of non-determinism in the process that the agent brings in. And I mean, like your traditional rule-based systems are more fixed workflows. There's a defined path. But by putting certain parts of LLM into the piece, you're kind of bringing in non-determinism, wherein there could be multiple options that the agent could take in the process, and that's where your whole intelligence part comes in. Would that be a good way?
Yeah, it's a good way to think about it. Yeah.
Okay.
It has to be some kind of thing that needs some level of reasoning. Otherwise, I see a lot of people building agents. It's like that's really should just be a workflow. It doesn't even need an agent. It might not even need an LLM agent. It might just be a regular workflow. So there's often confusion about what should use the power of an agent and what multiple agents and how do you hang them together. And then it gets into the more complex, really agentic systems where there's agents working together, either in a collaboration or they've got like a hierarchy. And then that's like an agentic system, right? It's like that system is described as being agentic.
Got it. where you have multiple, non-deterministic workflows or
Yeah.
agents working together in tandem.
Yeah.
Great. And then from your perspective, I mean, this is like a significant shift, right? I mean, in terms of how things were from a rule-based system like 3, 4 years back to a slightly more non-deterministic workflows. So what is the most, significant inflection point or change that you have seen in the whole agentic workspace, or at least over the past year or so? Yeah.
I think I would prefer to say last 6 months, because that's when the
Okay.
big change happened. I think just at the end of last year,
Mhm.
there were two things happened at the same time. The capabilities of the foundation models from OpenAI, let's say OpenAI and Anthropic,
Yeah.
Gemini also, from Google, but those two in particular, at the Christmas period, there was a huge sea change in the capability of those models. I think it was like
Right.
4.6 and 5.2 and 5.3 Spark came out.
Mm.
And they were able, and the other thing that happened, it was Christmas. So all the senior developers in Silicon Valley went off for Christmas, and they had playtime, right? So it was
Yeah.
like, okay. And, and like normal folks, they were playing with playing with AI coding, right? So all these people were suddenly building these amazing applications in
Right.
days, right? And they never had the time or the space to focus on that, because they were working really hard on what they were doing. And there
Right.
was people like Andrej Karpathy and a bunch of others said, and they're like the holy S moment, like, oh my God, like this thing is coding. Like it, and that's when he coined the term vibe coding. And then there was like this viral moment where everybody started building, and they were like, oh my God, entrepreneurs, multiple serial entrepreneurs are saying these things can actually generate production level code for applications. Now we have to like put a speech marks around that production level. You're a CTO, you know what I mean.
True.
But at that point, there was just this massive groundswell of like, there is a significant change in the capabilities of these coding agents to not just code, but to perform reasoning and long horizon tasking. Right? And those first couple of models were like blowing people away. I think the other inflection point was they quickly started to iterate as well and get better. And there's one of the benchmarks that measures the long horizon tasks, and that was going up like on a hockey stick, not incremental anymore. It was on a exponential curve.
Right.
And then OpenClaw happened. And when OpenClaw happened, it gave consumers and tinkerers and entrepreneurs something that they hadn't had before. They had access to an agent that would do what they wanted. There was no guardrails. The only guardrails that were there were what you impose on it.
Correct.
And the foundation model companies, when they gave you their harness or their chatbot or whatever it was that you were using, they had strict controls over what you could do, because they were like semi-liable for that. Whereas this open source project, it was just like, it was a harness, and you were completely reliable for what you did with it. The model was in the harness. And then all of a sudden, there was like this sea change of people being able to build and tell a model to do this. Okay, I want you to go build a website, use a credit card, go and buy things, create a social media network. And these things kind of coalesce together as the models were getting better and better. Harnesses were getting better, Claude Code, Codex CLI, Google CLI, and then the Codex itself, the application, and coding in the cloud, and all these so over a very short period, we were suddenly being able to code really effectively.
Perfect.
And then people who were coding were also doing project management, writing documents, building this other stuff, work related. And then people who weren't coders were like, hey, wow, I can use this really powerful stuff to build things that are not code. I can do real work. So yeah, then these agents now they're doing real work. They're in co-work. Codex is now doing real white collar work. So I think that's like the map of what's changed, the significant model change and coding harness, like the thing the model sits inside, kind of unleashed it to be able to do real work.
Right. I think you bring up a good point wherein code generation, software development in general, product management has been has kind of taken a dramatic shift as a result of this. So just from if you talk about developer tools or coding agents, which part of the software engineering process that you see has gotten impacted as a result of this?
Yeah. One of my friends in the companies that I work with, they're a software engineering house, and about 2 years ago, we converted everybody over to AI-driven development and test-driven development combined. And I would say it touched every single part of the coding process to certain different degrees. And there's still part of coding that you can't trust, I would say, to AI. I was just listening to a Lex Friedman podcast with the guys that develop FFmpeg.
Right.
And those guys are still writing in assembly and sometimes optimizing at the machine code level.
Right.
Because they're building codexes.
Correct.
And Lex was like, well, why don't you just use large language models? They were like, nah, there's no way for them to do that yet. They don't even understand that low down in the system to get to like machine code level, like optimization. So there's a scale, I think, of what. I think the easiest way to say is that whatever you are convinced still needs human judgment, it probably needs human judgment, and I think that's the litmus test. So the things like building the front end, I think that can be almost completely handed over to coding agents. Right. That doesn't mean that a human doesn't have to check it. That somebody has to have the taste and the wherewithal to look at the design and say this is working. But to give you an example, I think you could have something come in from a customer say, when this came up on the screen, the other button was over here, and it should probably be right next to it, so I don't have to go all the way over there. And that's like a fine-tuned thing. And then that could go into a PR. It could be automatically coded, put into a place where it could be viewed and tested in staging, and the product guys could say, "Yeah, perfect," and just commit it. Right. No developer in the loop at all. Right. So it's just a person came from a customer, came through the the product designer, a product owner, and out into production without a coding person seeing it.
Right.
And that's where I see. There's definitely places where it can be fully automated, and other places where it absolutely can't yet. And you need a human in the loop and a developer.
Right. I think that brings an important point in terms of what is that sweet spot for the coding agents right now. I think like you mentioned, there are scenarios wherein it could do the entire change autonomously, and there are places where you will still need a lot of human input. So is there a sweet spot? Like maybe is it building websites, or is it maybe if it is a more complicated application building, then you may need human in the loop. So if you can just help us on that.
I mean, just today there was an article released by Anthropic, and they've been talking about how much of their coding has been replaced. There's a guy called Boris who runs the whole Anthropic co-work and Cloud Code team, and he said 4 months ago, he said, I don't write for the type of code that I need to write. I don't write code anymore. He said, Claude is writing all the code. I'm the designer, the approver, I'm the person who's building this, and my team as well is building almost 100%. The code has been written by them.
Right.
So Cloud Code and Codex and the application on Mac, which was vibe coded in 2 weeks, that's a significant amount of code that was vibe coded. Vibe coding is the wrong term, right? I mean, it's actually professional coders using AI coding agents that are extremely capable now to build real world applications that are deployed and scaled to like millions of people. Right. So I don't think it's like a reduction to just websites. And what they just said as well, and this is really interesting and this is like brand new off the press, right? They said there's an 8x increase in productivity just over the last 3 months from 4.7 to 4.8. And then they're looking at a 52x increase, I think, with Mythos internally, because they're using Mythos. And they said this is lines of code, right? And they say underneath, lines of code is not an indication of actually outcomes. He said, but it's an indication of the amount of coding that people inside the company are actually producing, right? So it's like a leading indicator. And then they said they have another thing where this is like against the human in the loop a little bit, but they said when they're doing research, they have like a lead researcher, and if he gets to a point where he's stuck, they would have Mythos and the researcher come up with two solutions, and then they would have a third model that didn't know anything about the situation, test the two solutions and grade them. And just a few months ago, the person was always ahead. It was always like 51% the human, 30%, and then some gray area. Now with Mythos, it's like 61% of the time better than the human. Right. And these are like Anthropic developers, right? Researchers. So I think there's it's very hard to say what it is that coders can do and can't do. I mean, I think there's core parts of your, and you would know as well, right? There's probably core parts of your internal code base that is like it's the crown jewels. It's like that thing needs to be taken care of, right? And so if anything's going to be done that really needs human intervention, human in the loop, maybe not even allowed anybody to code it except a human who's expert, right? But a lot of the supporting code, around products. I think it's all open for AI coding now. Very well controlled, very well developed. You know, you have to have a good system for doing that. You can't just go in and let the thing code it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it ties back to your point where you mentioned about the taste, right? I mean, it boils down to that because uh, at least based on what our observation and my team's observation is that it depends on what you're telling the coding agent to write.
Yeah.
And for slightly harder scenarios wherein you have to make an architectural decision, um, I think there is a certain degree of difference between what a junior developer would provide the instruction to the AI to what
Yeah.
probably a more seasoned developer would ask the AI, right? And I think
Yeah.
it's that fine tuning where the judgment comes in. So from your perspective, like what are those areas, either from an architectural style or from a security standpoint, or I mean, what are those segments wherein you feel there is still a lot of reliance on the human side to actually guide the AI to to basically generate the right code or write the
So,
right
I mean, I think at every stage still right now,
right
I mean, one thing with agents, they can't start themselves, right?
right
Right. So if you
not yet.
introduce them, if you introduce them to your, they're not autonomous now, right?
Yeah,
You can have them on a scheduled task, they can be triggered, but
right
something needs to happen to get them to start moving.
right
And then it's okay. It also depends on if you're introducing them to a code base or whether you're introducing them and you've been coding for a while, and it's like, am I going to let it near my very like core code that's like mission critical?
right
And for enterprises, they probably need to think about this in a lot more depth, right? So there's this.
exactly
So I guess what I'm saying there is, it really depends on which application, what engineering, what type of coding, who is actually doing the coding. Is it a junior? Is it a senior? Is it a pod of people that are made up of? Because this is a new kind of methodology that you're seeing, where there's a pod, where there's a designer, there's
right
a product guy, and those two guys are also coders, right? So the designer is also coding MVPs. The product guy is also coding MVPs, and they're working
right
together with the developer.
right
And all of them, there might be 5 people developing in the team: a senior guy, a back-end guy, a systems guy, whatever you need in that pod. And then once they are convinced they understand what they want, then there needs to be somebody expert in AI coding systems. And how do you set them up? How do you
right
make sure that they're working properly? How do you give them the right context and let them loose in
right
the right part of the code base? So
right
it's a fully like change of workflow. Everything has to change before it's effective. But
right
where
right
is there problems? I don't think it's an easy answer. There's no one
yeah
answer. It just depends on what's the code base, who's developing, what are you trying to do? Is it simple code that might be? Yeah, then some code you just don't want you don't want anybody touching it, right? Except you might just have 2 guys in the whole company that you want touching that
exactly
code, right?
yeah
Like,
yeah
the idea that an AI agent is going to start doing that is like at this stage is probably not on the table. But like I
right
said, there's a whole supporting infrastructure of code where I think you can apply that.
right
Once you have competent people who have AI fluency, who've already understood and know how to use AI to code, and then
right
have them slowly introduce that into their workflow
got it
is important, I think.
got it so there's a certain level of learning that maybe even the developers have to adapt to the new way of coding, right? Instead of, I mean,
Yeah.
it is inevitable that the coding agents will ship out a lot of the code, but how to give it the right instruction, how to provide it the right context,
Yeah.
and the guardrails is probably a new way of working for the current devs. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. I mean, developers are very resistant to change as well. Just to give you my direct experience, we had like 40 developers. At least 6 of them just refused to use AI,
Hmm.
and they're don't get shocked by this, but they're no longer with the company, right? It's
Right.
like, if you are not going to take up, like, you're an expert coder, and this is the future. It's like, why
Right.
would you not embrace it and find out for yourself, where does it work? Where does it
Hmm.
not work? And I think
Right.
that's the key thing when you're talking about like your internal developers. This very senior developers might be more resistant to it
Right.
until they start using it, and then they're blown away. I mean, if Andrea Karpathy and some of the biggest, most
Yeah.
famous, I think biggest is not the right word, right? Biggest brained kind of developers in the world are saying this thing is ready to code, right? And they say, okay, inside of Anthropic, one of the biggest software companies in the world, and not just models, right? They're building scalable solutions. 80% of their code, they just said, has been written by AI.
Correct.
They never tell you which 80% and which 20%. Because that would be really interesting. It's like, what are about the 20% you don't write? And I think AI, OpenAI said it was like up to 70% or 80% of their code too.
Right.
Meta was saying like 80% of our code, but they don't tell you which code. That would be a really, really, really good insight.
Right.
And I think the reason why they don't is like it's very hard to tell, because on a developer by developer basis, depending on what they're developing, I think front end development, application development, that type of thing is an obvious place where it can be easily done.
Right.
I think, and then there was a use case recently where somebody, I think this is OpenAI, they used OpenAI 5.5 and Codex to create Node that would run on an edge device. Right. So an instance of Node.js that runs on an edge device, so you can run applications, Node applications on an edge device. Right?
On the edge.
And it was all coded completely by Codex, which is a bit nuts.
So talking about developers, right? I think there's it just brings to a point wherein how do you measure developer productivity in the AI age? Because one is we would probably need to know what is the AI's contribution, and like how do you measure developers productivity now? Given that they have to use the AI tools, they have to use the coding agents to ship out faster. Then what is the differentiation? How do I draw the line in terms of, how do you measure productivity and performance here?
Yeah, and there's been a lot of argument and pushback like out in the Twitter sphere and the noisy, talking back and forth. But people were saying, okay, everybody has to token max. I want to see lines of code shipped, and people are bragging like, I've just spent $1 million on tokens. It's like, well, what did you build with that? So I think the fundamentals aren't related to those type of metrics. I mean, I'll ask you a question now. Like, what do you measure your developers on now in order to know if they're doing a good job? Right? I don't think that changes that much. It's like COGS, impact, shipping. Like, what did you ship? Now, obviously, if they're able to use AI coding assistants and agents and long-running task, right? I mean, if you figure this out and you can have like 5 or 6 agents working on multiple different things overnight while you're asleep, and then you wake up and your job then is to assess the code, do code review, do some testing, have the agents test it, so and then you evaluate it. If your engineers are then doing that, obviously you're expecting more from them. But then I think you need to start measuring like with a lot more alacrity, so kind of making sure that the stuff that they're shipping has been reviewed. It is quality code. It's quality product. Right? Because it's very easy to get lazy. And this is a personal experience, right? I've written things where I then later come back to the thing I wrote and I say, okay, Opus 4.8, you're supposed to be really good. Look at my code base. And it's like, your code base is rubbish. It's like, you've got this one TypeScript file here. It should be split up into 4. It's 1,500 lines long. And like, what were you doing? And it's like, okay. Yeah. So I think that the assessment of making sure that the developer is actually reviewing the code is actually it's not just like sitting back and allowing it to happen. But still, I mean, it's going to come down to what are you shipping, the cost of goods, how many tokens are you using? Not because are you using enough? It's like, are you spending too much money? Have you just got this thing turned up to max?
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's not been nailed down yet. I think that's a moving target.
Okay. So I think it's just that the definition has kind of changed from what it was earlier to what you're saying in terms of how much is shipped, are you optimizing? Are you making sure you're giving the right context to the LLMs and all? So,
I mean, even more than that, I think that the first assessment is going to be, are the people AI fluent? You've trained them? They know the tools that they're allowed to use.
Right.
There's resources for them to upskill and become AI proficient coders. So have they done that? And if they have, then are they the new methodologies for coding? Are they embracing them? It's like, do they know how to do code reviews in the AI world, right? In the AI era? Right. And just there'll be different pipelines as well. When you redesign because once you've got the fluency and you're looking at like impact per hour, that's like making them more efficient. But once they become more efficient, and this is what we focus on with executives as well on normal workflows, is okay, you become AI fluent, and then we're looking for impact per hour. Like, how much change has this made to you? How much more efficient have you become? That's the low-hanging part of it. And then you get to the point where you can redesign your work, right? You're fluent, you're already efficient, you know how these things work. It's like, now I'm going to redesign my workflows in conjunction with you in the business and your software developer leaders, right? It's like, how can we now optimize our pipeline to take into account these AI workflows?
Right.
So it's a multi-level system. Yeah.
Let's do some prediction then. I mean, given the pace at which things are going, and let's take, I don't know, like you said, well, let's not take 3 years, or let's say 6 months or 1 year. Things are
No, we
changing
can do
so
3 years.
fast.
At 3 years is fine. We can. It doesn't matter what we say. It's not going to be right if it's 3 years, right?
Yeah.
But we can. I think it'd be good to think like 6 months.
Yeah.
Yes, we can do 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, like something like that.
Yeah.
So what's the question? What's the question?
Yeah. So I mean, let's see, maybe after a year or so, what do you think? I mean, where do you think this will mature into? I think we have already seen a lot happen in the last 3 to 6 months in terms of how good the coding agents have gotten. So what is the future looking like?
Okay, so this is kind of multi-level. We've got more questions after this, right? Because I'm not.
Yeah, we have a lot.
Yeah, good. So coming to coding, I think
it's
just going to get, these things are going to get better and better. And I think more and more developers are going to become orchestrators. And it's an interesting, and this is not just in the coding world. I think even in white collar work and other work, each individual is going to be given the capability and the ability to have a team of like digital workers working for them.
Right.
And in this case, we're talking about coding, but also like I set up a design and video system in Codex where I didn't use Claude Design because Claude Design is just a way to make Anthropic a bunch load of money because it burns through tokens like there's no tokens. It's crazy. But it gave me a link then to something called Open Design. So I installed Open Design. It's this beautiful tool for doing design work. And I connected it up to Hyperframes and Remotion and a bunch of other things and HeyGen and 11 Labs.
Right.
And I have this fully autonomous like video creation system that normally would need multiple different types of creators, right? Designers, video editors, people with taste in video editing and voice and sound and audio and all this type of stuff, right? I didn't have to hire any of those. So I'm orchestrating this amazing video production system, and I have no idea what I'm doing, but it's producing really good content and output. Right? And I think that's the world we're going to be living in. Each person is going to be able to orchestrate digital workers. And then it becomes like I think the change is going to be, that's going to be the change. Each developer is going to be empowered. And it might not be a developer. It might be a developer who is also like half a designer, half a product guy. And then a product guy might be mainly a product guy, but a designer and a developer. Right. So you can have these like people expanding their roles and overlapping and working together and just being able to produce whatever they're producing at a much higher rate. And I think we're going to see things like that happen. Where individuals, ICs are going to be like managers, even though they don't want to be managers, they're going to be an orchestration manager.
Exactly. But that gives a good point, which is, what is the defensive mode in this? Because now everybody has more or less the same tools with the same capabilities to churn out code, and everybody will probably have the idea of what to build. So for companies, what would be the defensive mode here when in the future to build unique products, basically?
If I had the answer to that, I would be in my own startup building it.
That's true.
It's something I've built things that I thought, everybody will want this, and I was building MVPs, and one of the things I built was, just to give you, this is like an anecdotal story, right? So I was building stuff and I was using a number of different agents. I was using Gemini, CLI, and I was using Claude Code, and I was using Codex. And there was no way for me to leave my machine and know when my agents had finished. But I saw there was a few repos, open source repos that did one thing, like they maybe allow you to see what's going on with Claude Code.
Right.
So I just went and I said, okay, cool. I'll take all these different things and web-based TTY, terminal emulator, put it on my phone. And I pointed it at a lot of code bases and said, okay, I want you to take the best of these, make a design, and come back and put this on my phone so I can see sessions running on my machine. And also, I want to be able to open a Claude Code session or open a Codex session and actually kick off some things.
Right.
That thing worked in one shot.
Okay.
it was one shot. It built it, and then there was some debugging and some of the iteration, but it did it in one shot. It took those code bases. I didn't have to design anything from scratch. Put them together,
right.
And then it was able to run it on my machine in a little server, and then put it on my phone. Just a private thing over tail scale.
Right.
And then 3 weeks later, Dispatch came out.
Wow.
And and then not long after that, Codex did that as well. So, and then there was cloud-based agents as well, which I could run inside. So I can open both of these apps now. Just completely killed that product. So, and that's a long way of saying I really don't know. I think the moat that people do have though is whatever it is that they have from a proprietary data perspective.
Right.
Yeah. So if they're building something that internally, intrinsically has their data as the driving force behind it, the engine, then nobody else is going to have access to that data except you.
Right.
And then if you're building something around that, or if you're enabling a customer to take advantage of their data, maybe that's one thing I think maybe.
Yeah. It also means the bar to build a really solid product has gone up. So because you by default your products are going to be at a minimum level, right? So I think that's also a point where you have to keep fine tuning your products to a really sharper level. Yeah.
And I think for entrepreneurs, because I know there might be a lot of entrepreneurs here.
Yeah.
The great thing about now is you can just iterate it. If you look at some of the, I follow quite a few people who are just doing. They just iterate it over and over again on MVPs. It's like MVP. They put an idea out and see if anybody signs up for it, and if enough people sign up, they build it. And then they build it, they see if it gets traction. Exactly. And that's how a lot of these like smaller, multi-million-dollar companies sprouted out, because they were they like tried 10 or 15 ideas and put them out into the world and see which one got traction, and that was amazing. So I think we've got some questions.
I think talking about enterprises, then do you see any industries or any segments where there is like a solid use case for agentic, like where you're seeing really good ROI as well? Because there are a lot of agents out there, but where's the real value? What are agents or industries that are actually seeing the real value out of it? Yeah.
I think the hardest one is enterprises that have compliance risk. Right. So I was just speaking to somebody in legal in a large company, and internally they have AI products from Microsoft, but they're not even allowed to connect those Microsoft products to their Microsoft 365 applications.
Okay.
Because their Microsoft 365 applications have all of their client data on it, and they haven't figured out yet if there's any risk in them doing that. Even though Microsoft has all of their data, they still have to assess the risk of things like prompt injection, exfiltration of data using these new attack techniques.
Right.
So for them, it's like, why would I deploy agents into this very complex, compliance-heavy enterprise? Now, it has to be a lot more robust before we do that, and a lot more controls. And I think that limitation is in the right place. It's with compliance, with the CISO, with whoever's looking at risk management. So those folks, along with the lawyers, are limiting the access. And there's other people who are just limiting access to AI because of they have the idea like, well, let's just be safe.
Got it. Yeah.
And those are the two extremes of like blocking it. And then there's other people just YOLO, right? They just, okay, everybody use what you want. I just make us successful. And I think that's the let's call it an advantage and a risk that startups have. Like they are not bound or controlled by the same things as their, let's say, the companies that are going after their business, right? They want to the ones they're going after, they are kind of stuck in place because they're big and behemoths. And the startups have got a chance now to use AI to really accelerate what would normally take years to compete against these incumbents. You now have this chance to really quickly accelerate while they're standing still because they don't know how to do what they need to do.
Got it. But would that mean that companies would start insourcing, or they'll try to build the products themselves, given that now they have the workforce to do it, they have these agents who are good enough to do it faster? I think would that be a challenge for the startups, given that these things can be built faster as well?
Yeah, yes and no, let me say.
Okay.
So there's a difference between being an extremely technical and capable person inside of a role that is not a coder, and then being able to vibe code something into existence,
Right.
or even having enough, like, gone away and done some research about how to best build with AI, because you can build applications just very simply, right? But can you build it securely? Can you build it so that, will it scale?
Right.
Have you any idea what like a Kubernetes cluster is? Do you even know how to answer the question? How much scaling is it going to have? Do you know how to implement 2FA? And if you do that and you're going to send emails to people, do you know how to make sure that emails actually get delivered for 2FA?
Got it.
So all that complicated stuff is
Okay.
still the why you need good developers. I think, you can vibe
Got
code
it.
that into existence, whether you can actually launch it as a product. That's where it becomes sticky.
Got it.
And I think this is where the idea of a product developer and an MVP. If you're make one small point here. There was supposed to be all the developers were going to be out of work by now, right? Because these things can code. But there's been a massive uptake in the amount of developers being required, because companies now are saying, oh, we can build things internally. Fantastic. Let's hire some developers to do it. So now they want a development team to do this instead of vibe coding it, because they understand the risk.
Correct.
And then there's also an outsourcing opportunity, because I think people will get to the point where they understand they can vibe code an internal app, but they can't vibe code a product that's customer facing. They actually need developers to do that.
Got it.
To do it securely in compliance and make sure that it's working properly.
No, it's great. I think, and you do this very regularly, wherein you advise a lot of leaders in terms of AI adoption, agentic adoption as well. So usually,
I do, but not technical leaders. Okay, these are our ICP is really non-technical executives, so that they can understand AI and its use case, and then maybe know how to develop that within their own company.
And what advice do you usually give them when they're evaluating getting into agentic or bringing the agentic practice into their company? So what advice do you normally give them here?
I dine not to do that. What I teach really is the fundamentals of how to build AI systems. So, and remember, to give you a flavor, right? So I'm teaching, if you're going to use Codex and Cowork, it's quite intimidating. I mean, Cowork and Claude Code, they've got code in their thing. It's like quite intimidating for a leader that's non-technical to kind of open Codex and say, okay, well, now what? Right. So I teach the now what. How do you start it up? How do you develop an agent inside there? How do you connect it safely? What type of permission should you give it? And how do you build an agent system that can work that? And that then takes them away from the assistant border directed type ChatGPT and custom GPT into like the more, this can do work for me. And then I'm planning another layer, which would be much more technical for technical leaders.
Okay.
But I would not, I mean, these are big companies. This is like, think NVIDIA, right? BCG, right? We have leaders from those type of companies. Right? I am not in a position to advise them on how they should introduce AI agents into an enterprise that big.
Got it.
Yeah. But I can give them the language, the understanding, the teaching about what they are, the risks, the pluses, the negatives, stuff like that, so that they can have and think about it in the right language, have the right knowledge in order to be able to do that, and talk to the CIO and the CTO, and be on at least an equal footing.
Perfect. Let's do a quick rapid fire. I think we have probably around 10 minutes, so let's do a quick rapid fire, and we'll probably open up for questions from the audience as well. I think there have been some questions which I've tried to accommodate here as well. So let's do a quick one. One AI trend that's overhyped.
The fact that it's going to take everybody's jobs.
Okay, that's that's good to hear.
No, I think that's over. It's obviously going to cause massive disruption, but I'm kind of in the camp of, if 80% of all coding in the world can be done by AI agents, how come there's more and more coders being required? This doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense, right? So,
okay, one AI trend that's underappreciated or not talked about much.
Underappreciated. I think it's mostly, it depends. If we're talking about like a technical audience, I think people understand it well enough. But I think if you look at some of the AI adoption curves, people like us who understand this and actually developing AI, if you have like a 100, like 1,000 by 1,000 square dots on a graph. Like we're in this little tiny one of the dots. We're like 1% of one of those squares of the adoption curve. People who really understand AI. So I think it's massively underappreciated by most people. Yeah, I think we are in a bubble where we think everybody knows about this stuff, and they don't. I get reminded of that every time I'm teaching a new class. In fact, my CEO Dan is like, "Okay, Gary, you're going in there expecting everybody to know what's going on. They don't. It's just not normal. People don't actually know this stuff, and I think that's the thing people don't understand. Is like everybody in the street who are walking around, they've probably never even seen it.
That's true. No, that's true. I agree. Yeah.
Because 1 billion users of ChatGPT is only like 1/7 of the planet, right?
Exactly. Okay, one last one. One skill every engineer should learn now.
The ability to talk to their computer. And I will tell you why. It is much easier to have a oral discussion with an agentic workflow kind of thing that you're building through something like Whisperflow than it is to try and type. Right? The speed at which a person types, and I know this seems trivial, but once you get, because talking actually, the way you think and type is not the same way as you think and speak. And if you try and, like when you're typing technical instructions to something, right, it doesn't naturally translate that you can speak like that into it. But it completely limits you. I can type like the fastest typist on the world. I've been typing since I was 12 years old. Right? I can type, but I can't type anywhere near as fast as I can speak. Right? People tell me I speak way too fast anyway. And that conversational workflow, I've also found that with an AI, that when you're talking with it, it's natural language because it's processing natural language. It's actually a much better dialogue if you're talking to it than if you're typing. Yeah, and then it becomes like, how can you actually converse with it with an AI to get it to the point of where you want it to be? That's a really important skill, I think.
Okay, perfect. So I think articulation is important. Looks like okay. We have a question from Nina. What are the top 3 tools all developers must be given to make them more productive?
A Ferrari, a Rolex, and a holiday. Nina's the good. I'm kidding.
You mean the watch?
Yeah, Ferrari, a Rolex, and extra pay. More shares. No. It's very hard to say, like, pick a set of tools. And I mean, better post to a developers, but I would say training and the space to, rather than a tool, I think the training and the space to actually experiment is more important than which tool they use. And I think it's kind of, sometimes it's hard in a large company where it's like, okay, we have a relationship with OpenAI and we have to use OpenAI. You know, Microsoft have just said, no more using Claude Code, you have to use Copilot CLI. And all the developers are like, but it's like 10 times worse. We don't want to. Right. So I think letting do you define which type of IDE your developers can work and which terminal emulator they use? No. It's okay. Whatever makes you comfortable and productive, I think that's where you want to get to. And then, yeah, if they like Claude Code, if they like Codex, maybe figure out a way to enable that. Yeah, I think that's an important thing. So where people find the most comfort. Because in my team, there's one person really like I love Codex, and 2 months ago I was really like Claude Code only CLI. That's all I did. And I think so. Yeah, those development tools, I think you need to set them free if you have the money.
I agree, because I think it's kind of a personal choice, because I personally like Gemini CLI for some of the coding operation. At least it's gotten better in the last few months. But like you said, we don't define IDEs, but we can define, at least you can subscribe some tools that they can look into.
Yeah, exactly. Give them here's a selection of tools, but the must part of Vidina's question is like, you must learn how to use them. Is the must, right? I think for developers.
So true.
By the way, Gemini CLI has been it's been closeted, so they've replaced it with anti-gravity CLI, which is not open source. It's not very good. So you see, this is a good reason why you should at least be proficient in 2, so you can switch. Yeah. Any more quick fire?
Let's open up for any other questions from the team. for the audience?
Outstanding. Yeah, I would love for Gary to do a rapid fire on Shri now to see. Let's put Shri on the hot seat, Gary.
Yeah. What do you think is going to happen in 3 years that is going to surprise everybody when it comes to AI?
I think there'll be a lot of AI employees, is at least the whole AI employee digital worker thing that's going on. I feel we will see a lot of it. Like you said, the autonomy scale will shift.
Yeah.
But what I would say is we have seen this story before. When I was working at eBay, there was a point where people said mobile experiences is going to take over the web experience, and people will stop using laptops. And we had a chart in eBay wherein we used to graph a chart saying, okay, today the mobile usage is 30%, 35%, 40%, 40. And surprisingly, after it reached 50, it never climbed up to 50 or even 55. So
Yeah.
there's always a tipping point. I always feel that nature will always bring it to a tipping point. It's not come to the tipping point yet. So we see the autonomy climbing, but I'm pretty optimistic that it'll stop, or at least it will reach a equilibrium at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because your position, what do you think the one thing that leaders in a senior technical role like yourself have the responsibility to do for their companies? And not just technical companies that have already embraced AI, but there's a lot of companies out there that haven't even started this journey yet. What would be your advice?
I think you need to learn first before you can tell somebody anything. So I always felt that I threw myself into this whole coding agents like probably a year and a half ago, and I started building my own. I think unless you get first-hand experience of what it is, how to use it, how to get expertise in it, you cannot or tell your team, or you cannot at least have a guidance in terms of what to tell your team, or so, right. So I think it's very important for leaders to reinvent themselves and then be ahead in the race to understand how to use AI. Otherwise, it will be very hard here.
Yeah. So I read one of your pieces where you said human judgment is going to be a key thing that we're going to do, and you said, okay, you can automate and delegate to AI to a certain point within a framework. And this is like the 5 buttons, but it can't invent the 6th button.
Correct.
So do you think in the next 3 years, the ability to invent that 6th button may appear?
I think what I meant is that I'm saying you don't give it the option to invent the 6th button. You just give it 5 and say you work within this. I think I'm more on the side wherein you still have to limit the amount of access AI gets.
Yeah.
I think that's my point, is to not give the option at all.
Yeah. I mean, I that's one of the big mistakes I think people make when they go into Codex or something, and they're inexperienced. They will switch on every single connector. They're like, oh yeah, I've got Gmail, I've got a calendar,
exactly.
Like connect.
Yeah.
And then when the AI is trying to do something, it'll say, hey, I've got access to like this drive over here, and let me read that. And that's a confidential drive. You're not supposed to read that one, but now I can see it. So those things are bounded. You need to have very, very good bounded workflows. Okay, we're coming up to the top of the hour. I wanted to change my prediction for 3 years. I think one thing that people don't take into account is AI is going to become embodied. We're going to have robots everywhere.
So
There's going to be AI's agents inside of a robot, inside of cars. There's going to be flying cars soon. They've just said that in the US, they're going to have 3 or 4 airports where there's going to be flying Ubers to get you into town this year.
That'll be good.
And there's going to be drones everywhere. I think embodied AI is going to be everywhere in 3 years' time, because NVIDIA just released a bunch of chips that sit inside laptops where AI models, 120 billion parameter, 1 million context models can sit on a laptop now.
Nice. That'll be good. Yeah.
So I think that embodied AI agents everywhere is going to be, it's coming for us. The robots are coming.
Physical AI.
Physical AI. No, this is amazing session. Amazing session, Gary and Shri. Very, very, very enjoyable and informative at the same time. And Gary, to your point, Dubai is launching it in a couple of months, the flying taxis. So we'll be flying in Dubai soon. So But thank you very, very much.
Thank
I
you,
think
too.
the
Thank you,
audience
Nina.
knows how to reach Gary and Shri if they have any further questions. Amit's got the recording for all of us, and really, really appreciate. This has been an amazing session. Great, great way to start the day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you
Thank you,
both.
Gary.
everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Shri. And thank you, everyone who joined us today.
Happy Friday. Have a good weekend.
Happy
Have a
Take
Friday,
good
care,
everyone.
weekend.
everyone.
Thank you so
Take
much.
care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.